Welcome back to the garage. Today we're going to install the big brake kit Stoptech ST60 to the front right corner of the BMW E93 M3. The first step is to remove the brake wear sensor that's just simply pulled out of the caliper. Next we'll use an 18mm wrench to remove the caliper assembly from the steering knuckle. We're going to reuse those bolts, so you want to hang on to them. Before you completely remove the caliper assembly, be sure to loosen up the brake hose. Take the final bolt out and pull the caliper from the assembly in one piece. It'll stick a little bit. Once you get it off the rotor, you can use a box, maybe the box the new calipers came in, to support the weight of it while you're doing the rest of the work and removing the old calipers. So the first step is to break the brake hose from the brake line. With an 11mm flange nut wrench, two of those, and a 14mm flange nut wrench. After breaking it free, you're going to want to use the plugs that came in the kit to plug both the brake line and the brake hose. With everything plugged up and disconnected, you can take the entire brake caliper assembly out of the car. Take a look at it, see if there's any abnormal wear, anything you should be aware of, and start working on the rest of the car. So in order to remove the rotor, there's two retaining screws that need to come out. There's an Allen key that can be removed with an Allen wrench. Just be careful not to strip those out, and then use a rubber mallet to knock the rotor loose if it sticks at all. The brake shield is much easier to cut if it's removed. It's very easy to remove with three 10mm bolts. Once it's removed, you can cut the brake dust shield as the instructions indicate to provide clearance for the new brake calipers. And then that goes right back on with the 10mm bolts and then just snugged up. With the dust shield installed, you can put the caliper bracket on. You'll want to test fit that first to make sure that you cut the dust shield properly. You install those with the bolts used for the stock caliper, and you want to make sure you pull that towards the back of the vehicle as you're tightening up the bolts. There's a lot of slop in the holes on the steering knuckle. Once it's installed, you're going to torque that to the factory torque spec of 81 foot-pounds per bolt. The new brake rotor can be installed. There's 3 pins that need to be aligned as you install it, and you want to hold that in with the retaining screws. Here's a case where you definitely want to use new retaining screws. In my case, I used old ones. That's all I had, but definitely do yourself a favor and order new ones ahead of time and install new retaining screws. Once they're installed, you can check to make sure that the rotor doesn't have any sort of interference, and you're good to go on the next step. The big brake kit comes with a banjo joint for connecting to the caliper. It's a little bit different than what's shown in the instructions, so you just want to be sure that you have the right parts for your kit. The assembly of the banjo joint is one copper washer, the banjo joint itself, and another copper washer, and then that assembly gets threaded into the brake caliper. Again, this is left out of the instructions from Stoptech. I think they were using some other form of connection previously. You'll want to rotate that into the position that it's going to be on the vehicle. Try to approximate where it's going to be. You're going to tighten it up in the last step, and you can install it to the bracket. Test fit it, make sure everything works properly. So before finally installing it, you do need to take off the cage from the top. The caliper bridge is held in with 4 long threaded rods, and those do have washers on them. So once you remove all 4 of the bolts or threaded rods with an Allen wrench, you're going to need to turn over the assembly and make sure you get all 4 washers, and then you can just put those right back on there so you don't lose them or forget about them when you go to assemble it later. The easy way to take out the caliper bridge is to take a rubber mallet, the wooden handle of a rubber mallet, and just knock that out. It'll come free and leave you a nice big opening. Now you can install the caliper to the assembly and make sure everything fits properly. The caliper is held on with 2 self-clinking nuts and 2 washers. So you're going to install both of those. They'll get fairly tight. They call them jet nuts, I believe, in the Stoptech manual. They're going to be fairly tight to install. You'll want to route the brake hose so that it's out of the way, and get that in position. Actually lock it in on the support on the shock itself. Then take a 1/2 millimeter long socket. It's important to use a long socket to tighten up the jet nuts, or the self-clinking nuts, and those will be torqued to a setting of 40 foot-pounds, and you will generate some heat when you put those on, so just alternate back and forth until you get them on entirely. The brake pads can go in next. Just try to line them up properly. Make sure they're clear of the pistons, and use a rubber mallet to just gently tap on the metal part of the brake pad, the backing plate, until it slides in. It shouldn't take anything more than just very light tapping, and you can start with the back pad and then go to the front pad until they're both in. Again, check to make sure that everything spins freely, there's no interference. So now the bridge can go back onto the caliper. You do need to check the orientation of it, and make sure you remove the labels. I found this out the hard way. Read the instructions. The bridge will not go on easily if you try to start on the bottom or the top, and then try to push, try to force in the other bolts. You don't want to use the threaded rods to pull the assembly together. So you can see actually on the other side of the vehicle I did it the right way. Start with one of the 2 inside bolts, get it started, and continue to tap with a rubber mallet until you can easily slide in the other middle bolt. Fasten that down just by hand with an Allen key, not tight, just snug, so that you are engaged in the threads. And then make sure you don't try to drive that bolt in. You want to only push directly in. So tap on the bridge with a mallet, and then it'll go right in. Same thing with now the top and the bottom. So it's actually quite easy. Just be sure to start with the 2 middle ones, and it's no problem whatsoever. And snug those down, and you're good to go. The last step, or second to last step, is to install the brake hose, the brake line. There's a washer that goes onto the hose, and then the hose can be threaded onto the brake line. That'll be tightened up, snugged up, as well as the brake hose connection to the caliper. Don't forget about that. That was just kind of temporarily put in place until you're able to see where everything's going to sit. So you'll actually tighten that one up as well. I don't have that in the video, but you do need to make sure you do that. And the last step is to take the wear sensor and just bundle it up out of the way somewhere that it's not going to get damaged as you drive. And that's it. So we've now installed the big brake kit on the front right of the vehicle. The front left is exactly the same, and we'll move on to bleeding the brakes and installing the inner brake hoses. Thank you.